I believe we are live. Welcome to the Business of Property, everyone, on Property Development Australia. I have a very special guest today. They're all special. We have Simone Schenkel from Gruen
Hello.
Eco Design. And feel free to join the Zoom room if you have the link. It should be at the events page. And Simone is going to be sharing with us her experience and what she does with Gruen Eco Design. She's a certified passive house designer, which is all very cool in my world. Simone, welcome to the Business of Property.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, excellent. So tell us a little bit about what Gruen Eco Design is and what motivated you to get into this
Yes.
space.
Yeah, so I think I was always passionate about the environment. And I studied architecture in Germany. And when I came to Australia in 2007, I was quite shocked how bad the houses were here. Or I should rather say the first winter in our apartment, it was so shocking. I never ever was as cold in my entire life. And everyone kept telling me you don't need double glazing or insulation. And I thought something is wrong here. And I remember I went to a talk in the CBD about the newest and best inventions about energy efficiency. And I thought, hold on, that's what I learned back then at uni. And that's then when it started to click and when I realized, okay, my education was different or special to compare what people learned here. And luckily, my first boss back then, he was actually a property developer. He loved everything German, everything efficient. And I told him the whole story and said, what about we try to design and build homes more according to the German standard? And yeah, luckily he was on board and we started to advocate for that and started to develop houses that way. So that's how it all started. And then, yeah, fast forward, then at one stage I started my own business, which was in 2013. But I had a little bit of a slow start because I had 2 babies in the way, which weren't quite planned.
They slow things
So
down.
the first 4 years, I was pretty much working from home part-time with a few contractors. But then since 2017, yeah, what was it, August or September, when I got my first full-time staff and my first office, things have been taking off since then.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to ask the silly question, and I'll as well. And you're like, I know which one it is. There'll be a few people that will probably comment on the Facebook page. So if they do comment, I'll let you know as well when we have a little bit of a break. Because,
Yeah.
Hi Todd, hi Brendan, hi Mirza. Thank you for joining us. What is a passive house?
A passive house. Yeah, I knew you would ask that. Hold on. What I'm actually going to do is, can I share
You may
my
share, and I'm
screen?
going to.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is passive house. It's a voluntary but rigorous standard to design highly energy efficient and healthy homes. But what I'm going to do is I want to share with you a short video which explains it, I think, the best.
Fantastic.
Can everyone see my screen?
I can see your screen, so
Okay.
I'll say everyone can. Oh, we can't hear the volume. That's the only thing.
Can you hear it?
No, I can only see it.
Okay, hold on.
Oh,
Maybe.
what I might do.
Okay, let's go back. So what I might do is, maybe if I turn off my headset for a second, maybe let's.
Yeah, okay.
The sound is coming from my headphones. Is that better?
Not really. What we might do, I might get that link from you and put it in the Facebook comments. So if anyone wants to have a look at that.
Or maybe what I can do is I let the video run and I maybe can talk over it a little bit because
Yes.
at least then
Yeah, that would be great.
Just so okay, so let's try that again. Oh, come on. I don't want to do notifications and I don't want to trial. Okay, so passive house, 90 seconds. So it talks about, that most houses typically, that they have a heater somewhere in the house to help them with the heating.
Mm-hmm.
And also most houses, I think we leave it. I think that's not going to work. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's
It's cool.
unshare. So maybe, yeah, I'm just gonna send you the link and then we can do that. Not sure why the sound
All right.
isn't working, a shame. But hold on, I've put it in here. So basically, let me try to summarize it. So if a house is really well insulated and doesn't have any air gaps or thermal bridges and has proper insulation, then you actually don't need much heating in the house. Because
Mm.
typically just the heat that's produced by its occupants, by the sun coming into the house, or just by the light bulbs and by cooking is enough to warm up the house. And we're here in Australia, we're actually quite fortunate that our climate is so mild that most passive houses that are built get around without any form of heating or cooling. In Europe, it's a little bit different. Typically, they have some small heating or cooling units attached to it. But in Australia, it's actually quite simple to get there. And but an important factor as well is fresh air in the house. And one thing that probably most people don't know is that we humans produce a lot of water. So, for instance, a 3-person household produces 8 liters of water a day. And the thing is, most Australian homes, they're so drafty that humidity and air just goes in and out. So it's not such a big drama. But the difficulty is as soon as you start to build airtight homes, the humidity gets trapped inside. And often nothing might happen for quite a few years, but sometimes after a few years, you can get mold built up inside the walls or behind cupboards, for instance. And that's what in Europe happened in the 90s or 2000, when suddenly people got really sick with asthma and other immune disease, and what they call the sick building syndrome. And because of that, what the passive house introduces is a mandatory way of ventilating the house, a heat recovery ventilation system that kind of pre-warms or pre-cools the incoming air, but also makes sure that you constantly have fresh air in the house.
Right, just on that point, you mentioned about a number 8 liters. So
Yes.
what's the 8 liters of water that's being
Just breathing by our
produced in the
breathing
house?
in the house, just our
Ah,
breathing, our cooking, our showering, it's 8 liters of water. And it's quite interesting. When I studied in university in Germany, building physics was a big part of our education, and it was actually a subject everyone hated because it was quite tough. But our professor, he was quite old style, and he was strongly against plants or animals inside the house because they produce even more water. And he said, you can never ever put a rope against an external wall because humidity and mold would form at the coldest spots of the house.
yeah.
And another interesting thing is, even back then in Germany, we talked a bit about passive house design, but just in terms of energy efficient design, there is so much humidity inside the house that he recommended back then at least 3 times a day, you have to do a proper cross ventilation. So that means you have to open windows properly. We're not talking about the awning or something. We're talking about for 10 or 15 minutes opening windows on opposite sides. Otherwise, you can get issues with humidity. But now imagine if it's really hot or really cold outside, you would never ever do that. So that means, yeah, you get into a little bit of problems when you have an
There
energy.
goes the dogs, Alex.
Yeah,
No dogs in the house.
yeah.
I didn't.
But yeah, we were always laughing about him. He was a bit extreme, but he had a bit of a point.
Yeah, okay. Yes, it was a bit extreme. So, all right. So, I mean, you highlighted a few things there as to what the benefits are, but what are the main things for people to consider with
Yeah.
Passive House?
Yeah. So I would really strongly recommend to watch this video, Passive House in 90 seconds. It really explains it nicely with plain words. But the big issue I see with building here in Australia is that the energy ratings, they're all good and nice. But unfortunately, energy rating is just a theoretical rating on paper. So that means even if on paper you have a 6, a 7, or 8-star rating, you have no guarantee at all how the house is actually built. Because according to the building regulations, the insulation has to be done well, everything has to be sealed well. But sadly, no one is responsible, neither the builder, nor the designer, nor the architect, nor the building surveyor. No one will actually check the insulation. And what they have done is they have tested many, many 7, 8, or 9-star houses, and a lot of them they performed with 2 or 3 stars. So it was actually quite shocking. And
Right.
what they did with those houses as well, they did blower door tests, so that they pressure test the house to see how much air leakage there is.
Mm.
And so you have to imagine that the quantity, or how they quantify it, is air changes per hour. So how many total air changes per hour does your house have? So imagine your house, if it's 1 hour, the entire air inside your house would be exchanged once.
Yeah.
So for instance, a passive house standard assumes 0.6, so a bit less than one exchange. The Australian standard now aims at 10. But however, most houses have been tested, even the new builds, with 14 or 15 on an average. And in theory, if you take it bluntly, that's almost like living in a tent. So there's almost nothing there. Like imagine, the entire air inside your house gets exchanged 14 times per hour. So no wonder everyone is heating like crazy and the houses don't stay warm. Or everyone has to, the air conditioning has to run constantly and the houses don't stay cool in summer. But that shouldn't be the case. The houses should stay, they should be able to keep the temperature a little bit.
Mm.
And that's a big issue with the energy rating itself. But the nice thing with the passive house is that it's quantifiable. So there is lots of techniques and physics and things behind it. So the passive house standard started in 1990s in Germany and Switzerland. And there is a lot of science into it. But the thing is, lots of calculations and things. But you actually get at the end what is on paper. So
Right.
for once, everything is detailed on paper, but it's also tested actually on site, that you prove that the details are done how they need to be and that the house actually is as airtight as you wanted it to.
So is passive house the same as a 10-star rated house?
No, not really. A 10-star rated house, again, is only on paper. So in theory, a 10-star rated house wouldn't need any additional heating or cooling. But it's not quantifiable. So if you had really bad luck and you had a builder who doesn't have a clue and builds the windows in or the insulation in poorly, you might actually have a poor performing house.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's the thing a bit with energy ratings and with passive solar design. It can go well. So you can end up with a really nice, well-performing house, but it can also turn out really sour. So it's a bit of a lottery thing. You don't really know what you're getting.
So is theoretically a 10-star rated house meant to be a passive house, but it's just that we're not testing it?
Partially.
Okay.
To some degree.
Okay. So what are the regulations now? So who's sort of certifying in Australia whether a house is passive or not?
So how it happens is, for once, you have to do a lot of details. So during the design process, you have to make sure that for once you have a continuous insulation layer around the house. So you can't have any gaps somewhere. You need thicker insulation than for normal houses. You can't have any thermal bridges. So thermal bridges, you have to almost imagine like a thermal highway. So steel, for instance, is a really good thermal conductor. So if you had a steel element going from the inside of your house to the outside, the cold and heat could just travel through it. And with the passive house, you also have to show that this is not happening. And so you have to detail everything around that. And also you have to detail an airtight layer. So typically in the passive house, you have a airtight membrane that wraps around the entire house to make sure you don't have any unwanted heat loss or heat gain. And then once all the drawings are done, you calculate it. And like I said before, there is a lot of science behind it. And so you have to calculate everything on paper, and they calculate thermal bridges, penetration. So kind of each screw almost that goes into the house has to be calculated to make sure that there isn't a thermal problem. And then once the house is built, you have to do a photo documentation to prove that the details are actually done how they were meant to be. And then everything gets checked off by an independent certifier again. So it's a lot of
Okay. So
reference.
are there some examples of obviously projects that you've done that and I know you've been working on your property as well.
Yes.
Talk to us about that, because that's an existing property. And
So Not quite. So we have in our existing property, we've renovated, but we got it from what was it, 0.8 stars to 8.4 stars.
Right.
But that's not a passive house. But we are also in the process of building our own, or starting to build our own passive house, which will be a new building.
Excellent. Okay. So even there's that process of going from almost under one to
Yeah.
8. What do you have some photos you're able? I know I should have asked you before if you can share with us, because I've seen them on your Facebook
Yes, 1
page.
second. Give me a second. I can
And maybe
open.
talk us through some of the things that you did to be able to convert
Yes.
your home.
Let me see if I can find it.
Lara has asked, what do you think of black cladding and roofs on
Yes.
houses?
That's a bit of a controversial subject. So the interesting thing is it depends a little bit on where you are in Australia, because obviously if you have dark cladding and dark roofing, it heats up the house. But interestingly enough, Australia is mainly a heating climate. Victoria is mainly a heating climate. So if you're in Victoria, it kind of makes sense to have, or it helps a little bit to have dark cladding. But actually the experts, they are fighting a little bit about it. So some experts are saying, especially when you're in a city, you should not have a dark roofing or dark cladding because it just heats the cities up more. So you'd rather have lighter colors. And then other people say, nah, we are a heating climate, and therefore if you have a dark roof, it helps you in winter to keep the house warmer. So there are pros and cons for each. If you're in a hot climate, I would rather stay away from a dark roof though.
Yeah, good idea. There's a question here. While you're doing that, I'm going to read some questions if you don't mind.
And I found the photo. So if you...
Todd has asked, is the benefit to the purchaser the long-term payback as the initial cost would be higher? He says, I really like the idea and have seen passive housing in New Zealand, but here in Queensland, it may be a hard sell as a developer.
Yeah, it is hard. So I think at the moment there might be one certified house in Queensland. I mean, it's slowly getting more and more and more interest. The good thing is, though, that you barely need any cooling anymore when you do those passive houses in hot climates. So there have been quite a few in Asia. Then that's interesting. But yeah, the problem is there isn't quite a market for it yet, I think. Not a lot of people interested in passive house. But having said that, building highly energy efficient homes with a higher star rating that are done well, I think there's probably definitely a growing market for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's swap to sharing screen mode again.
Okay.
And
so
talk us through your property.
Yes. Okay. So let's share that. So let's just start with this. So you have to imagine our house was kind of which photo do I start? The typical 2-bedroom brick veneer apartment. So that's now a photo how it is now. But was the typical 2-bedroom brick veneer. So no insulation whatsoever, terrible single glazed windows. We actually had a dark green carpet everywhere, even in the toilet. The most disgusting thing I've ever seen. It had single glazed windows. It was freezing as had 2 bathrooms. 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And what we did when we moved in, the very first thing was we ripped off the carpet because we just could not stand it. I think it was literally the day we got the key. And but then we went full circle with the house. So we did rip off all the external plasterboard, so the plasterboard from the external walls. We insulated all the walls. We insulated the floor. We insulated the roof. We installed double glazed UPVC windows throughout. We also, I think my screen is in the way. We also turned the former bathroom, laundry, toilet into our master bedroom, which is this room here. And interesting enough, like most units or houses, there was no access to the garden. And on the north side, there was actually only the bathroom, the toilet, and the laundry. And so we turned this area into our master bedroom, which is this room here. So that used to be the bathroom window. And obviously we could have made it larger or something, but we wanted to do something quite cost effective because originally it was meant to be a bit of a flip for us. So we didn't want to change window sizes. And what we did then is we changed one of the linen cabinets and turned it into a European laundry in order to fit in the laundry again. So that's just the bedroom. And then, yeah, so we ended up with 3 bedrooms. Yeah, that was on a sustainable house day. That's the kitchen.
Oh, okay. You had the open day on Sustainable House Day.
Yeah. And also
Yeah,
what we did is it was a really big kind of kitchen, kitchen with a dining table included and then a living dining room. And we tucked off a little bit from the kitchen and turned it into a bathroom. So that means we ended up with a bathroom, ensuite, and 3 bedrooms. So yeah, turned a 2-bedroom, 1 bath into 3-bedroom, 2 bath. And yeah, so that's the hallway. We just opened up a wall to make a bit more light. And we did some, little things. So we took a wall out here. And actually, most people think, that's a structural element, but it's actually not a structural element. It was just a way to hide the different ceiling heights. Just some tricks to save a bit of money.
Clever, yeah.
And then, yeah.
So you mentioned the window sizes as well. How important is that to passive housing? And does that mean that anyone looking to build a passive house can no longer have beautiful wall to ceiling, floor to ceiling windows?
Now you definitely can, but it depends on the wide windows. In this case, we only kept the window sizes because we didn't want to make a bigger opening into the wall because that would have required a building permit. And we tried to avoid a building permit with this. Yeah, that was the only reason for the windows, but yeah, you definitely can get large, beautiful, amazing windows for a passive house. That's no problem. Yeah, and that's the outside. So as you can see from the outside, still a typical unit.
So structurally, was there anything that you needed to do to convert it?
Nothing at all.
So what were the main elements? Because it seems like you didn't have to do too much to be able to get it to the higher rating.
I guess it was really mainly the insulation and the windows. But interestingly, like when it comes to insulation, you can only do so much with insulation. So let's say you're sitting at a 6-star house, and even if you put in as much insulation as you can into the walls and the roof or the floor, you can maybe get up to 6.2, 6.3, but nothing else. But the second you go to better performing windows, the rating starts to 7 stars. And if you suddenly then look at the high performing double glazing windows, it jumps to 8 stars or even higher. It's mainly the windows. The windows have the biggest impact. Because one thing what most people don't realize is that even the best triple or quadruple glazed windows are not as good as an insulated walls. So, yeah.
Okay, so the proof here that even if you have a poorly performing house, that you can change it.
Yes.
So obviously, I mean, like insulation wise, what could you do apart from the ceiling?
Yeah, so definitely under the floor. And one important thing is as well, I often speak with people that say, I can't insulate the entire house or there are areas I can't get to, so why even bother? I'm a big believer that every little bit counts. Even if you can't get to every area, then at least insulate the walls you can, or insulate the floor where you can get under to. And sometimes it might be too tight underneath. Might not be able to get to some rooms, but do as much as you can. The ceiling is usually easy because most houses have easy access, so the roof is a no-brainer. But the next big thing is weather stripping or draft sealing windows and doors. Because most windows, they have such big gaps that you can feel the air coming in. So if you were to at least help with that, that would make a huge difference too.
Excellent.
And the nice thing with our house as well, at work often in the morning I joke, I'm complaining on a high level. So I told you before that we had a few nights where it was really cold, like 2 or 3 degrees, and I get up in the morning and our house is still 19 degrees, even though the heater was off the entire night.
So who do you get the star ratings? Like after you complete it?
Just the energy rater. But in our case, we could do that ourselves because back in the day when I started out my business, I was doing energy ratings for lots of other designers and architects as well.
Mhm.
So back then, when we renovated, I was actually still registered, so I could
Mm.
do it myself.
Okay. Alex has asked, how much did that renovation cost?
It's really hard. I have to look it up again. I had an article. We had an article once in the Sanctuary magazine where we talked about it. Um, it's hard to say because we did it in stages, and a lot of things had nothing to do with the energy efficiency.
Yeah.
But I would say maybe between 30 and 50 all up. But that's, with, yeah, we put in one new kitchen, two new bathrooms, did all the windows. Yeah.
Excellent. So it's not as, I mean, it's the price of a
No. And
regular
even the windows
renovation.
themselves, like I said, the windows make the biggest impact of all.
Mm.
And with the small units, there aren't that many windows. So the windows were $10,000 or something, which might sound a lot. But the thing is, it's not just the energy you save or the money you save on bills. For me, it's rather the comfort, because suddenly I feel good in my house, or, and
Mm.
especially during isolation when we were home all day, I really love our house. It performs beautifully. I never have to worry about that I'm too cold, or I don't have to worry about, oh, can I leave the heater on, or how will my energy bills
Mm.
be? We don't have energy bills.
So solar power.
Yep.
We added some solar panels on the top.
Yes, we also have a small solar system. We were quite lucky. We still get the really high feed-in tariff, so we still get 68 cents, which means we often have a bit of a profit even from the solar
Ah,
panels.
excellent day. So we're talking about existing houses, and
Yep.
are you able to walk us through sort of a new house and the sort of factors that you need to consider if you're looking to
Yes.
design a new house, a new passive
Um,
house?
a new passive house. I think I haven't saved a passive house. Yeah, but let me see which ones did I save before. So, I mean, for once, I'm a big believer that, less is more and quality over quantity. So I think, you don't need a massive, huge house, or a house doesn't have to be huge in order to feel bright and spacious. It's rather a matter of having the windows in the right spots, having maybe higher ceilings, and make the house feel well. But a problem I often see is that especially volume builders or display homes, they have so much wasted area in hallways and other things, and things that are just done really badly. So when building a passive house, it's important to look at the basics. So make sure that the house is as compact as possible, I would say. So most our homes, let's say, most of our clients would have bedroom homes, say 4 bedroom homes with one living area, or sometimes with 2 living areas. And they would be sitting between 200 or 220 square meters.
Mm.
Whereas if you look at display homes or volume builder homes with the same bedrooms, they're sitting way over 300 square meters.
Mm.
And so that's a bit of the one thing you need to look at to come up with a bit of a compact house. But otherwise, in terms of designs or styles, everything is possible, no matter if you want a Hampton style house or a mid-modern or ultra-modern, or if you want it to look like an eco shack. Any design style, any external finishes, everything is possible.
Okay, radio. So is this one of your designs here, or an example of a passive
Yes, they're
house?
all designs. I just need to see. But now they're actually all renovations. So that was a renovation to an old house as well. Now I think I just saved renovations here. Yeah, they were all.
So Alex has asked, how do you persuade property developers to invest in passive house? Apart from the fact that designing and building passive house is the right thing to do from a moral point of view, what are the
Yes.
financial benefits for a property developer?
The difficulty is if it's someone doing for themselves, or if it's something they keep. If you want to rent it out, or if you have to pay the bills or something yourself, then it gets fairly easy because your monthly expenses are almost zero. But if it's just a matter of resale value, then at the moment it might be a bit more difficult to get actual buyers that are interested. But I think one problem is that most buyers or people aren't educated yet, and they don't know the value of it. So one really interesting example with the Passive House Institute, we had a bit of a talk a couple of months ago from a developer who has childcare centers. and she has 3 childcare centers. So one was done just standard, Australian standard, one was done to the best Green Star rating, and one was recently completed, no, I think actually it was completed about a year ago, but they got the certification recently that they are Passive House certified. And that's, yeah, so one which is certified Passive House. And I think it was something like the 6-star childcare center has energy bills each year of around $40,000 or $50,000 when it comes for heating and cooling and electricity and all those things. I think the Green Star house had something like 15 or so. But then the interesting bit was that the certified Passive House, I think, had 100 or 200, and that was the little bit left over after they paid all the monthly fees for everything. And she said she had never thought what the difference would be, and also how much happier everything is in the actual premises, because the house feels so amazing and so much light in, and everything's so healthy. And yeah, so she's completely convinced, and she will do it again, because it was a really great return on her investment. And if people are interested, there are quite a few studies from overseas, though, where people have even checked with whatever students in school, for instance, that they learn much better in those healthy environments that in Passive House schools, or when it comes to office buildings, that people actually are less sick and there is less turnaround and less depression. So there is a lot of things going on in the background about those healthy homes. Where is it? I think around Ballarat, there is currently one developer group. They're trying to build a big office building to Passive House standard, and they're currently looking for investors. So there are a few things happening in Australia at the moment.
Okay, so definitely benefits from a longer term hold or an owner occupier. So what is the difference in terms of cost? So if you're talking, and it's, I guess it's difficult to compare apples with apples.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to say an actual cost, because how long is a piece of string, and every builder is so different. One difficulty that I find is that people often compare Passive House cost with volume builder cost. And the thing is, volume builders, they're much lower than a Passive House could be. But if you compare a Passive House with a custom builder, it doesn't need to be that much. And there also have been some studies that if you design it smartly, they can cost the same, or let's say an average of 10 or 20% more. But rather you compare it with a custom design home and not with a volume builder or big builder.
Yeah, so I guess if you compare it from a square meter rate, it's going to be, you can't beat with the volume builder. But then again, like you said, they are building larger houses as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing as well. So let's say if you build whatever 300 square meter at $2,000, or if you're building 200 square meter at $3,000, so you can kind of end up with the same, but with much better quality rather than just quantity.
Yeah. So what is I had a question in my mind. Typically, in terms of the materials, sorry, that was it. In terms of what the buildings should be built of, is there different things like, if you built with Hebel, if you built with SIP panels, if you are there construction systems and types as well that are more beneficial to produce a passive house?
It depends. Yes and no. In theory, this is just a project we're doing at the moment to townhouse development, where the client wants to keep the unit at the back. So the unit at the back is a single story, and they want to build that to Passive House standard. And the front one, they want to sell to fund the back unit. And that will be just to a high energy rating. So we're not going to go the full way to Passive House, because probably they might not... they might not appreciate it, and just some renderings. So back to materials. So yes and no. I personally am a big fan of structural insulated panels, just because the construction goes a bit faster, because it's partially prefabricated way of building, and also there is a bit less room for error, because to build an airtight building. But otherwise, kind of the easiest or most cost-effective way seems to be a figure stud wall. So typical house would have a 90 stud wall, and then for the passive house, you need to go to the 140 mil stud wall in order to fit in the proper insulation.
To a lot,
That's
yeah.
what a lot of people do in that instance. But we're also building a passive house with hempcrete at the moment, or we're detailing it, which is really exciting. And it's a really healthy and sustainable way of building, but a little bit more cost intense because there aren't that many trades of people doing it. So that would not be the most cost effective way of building it.
Yeah. And just on that hempcrete and you know, just really quickly talk about the benefits of hempcrete, because I think we don't typically, developers in particular, we're not doing hempcrete.
I mean, for once, it has a beautiful texture. So it almost feels or looks like wrapped earth. I think most people would be familiar with wrapped earth, so it feels really warm and homey. But also it's extremely highly insulative, because wrapped earth is completely the opposite. So in order to get a wrapped earth wall working well, you would need a sandwich panel to fit in insulation or something, and then it gets crazy expensive, which people wouldn't do. But hempcrete, for once, it's extremely well insulative. So you have the one wall system that kind of does it all. So it's the structure and insulation all in one. It's extremely sustainable because obviously, hemp grows really fast. And therefore one of the best materials probably for the environment. And in theory, it can be done as an owner builder because the hempcrete is quite labor intense, but can be done manually.
And you can get hempcrete in panels as well.
Yes,
is
you can
that
also
correct?
get it in panels. Yeah. And what's quite nice, I've seen a few projects as well where they just used it as features. For instance, like other homes, they put in a brick veneer wall or, a brick wall or a wrapped earth wall. You can put in a hempcrete wall as a really nice feature.
All right. And the other thing I've read about hempcrete is its breathability.
Exactly. It's breathable, and you don't have that much issue with moisture buildup or humidity or mold, which is really good as well.
Fabulous. Oh, I'll have to do another segment on hempcrete. Few questions here. David asks, would vertical garden covering the entire west-facing wall make a lot of difference in cooling?
That would actually help to keep the heat off the wall. But I guess you have to be careful that there wouldn't be too much metal potentially holding up the plants and then transferring the heat into the house. So as long as you had proper insulation, that would help. But so would any kind of shading a western wall. So you might be cheaper off just planting something in front of it, because green walls can be quite hard or cost intense to maintain.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about return on investment. So what would you say, as someone who designs, passive house, what would you say to encourage people to think about it in their developments or in their home building?
Yeah, I think, for once, having an energy efficient home should not cost more, or it doesn't have to cost more. You just have to follow some general basic when it comes to the design and the layout of the house, that you have your living areas to the north, that you don't overshadow yourself too much, that you don't have too much articulation. I think sadly often some drafties, designers or architects, they have not a clue and they just design whatever fits onto the site without thinking about it, which is quite sad. Because on most sites you can design something that performs somewhat better. And even when you use the kind of the standard insulation and kind of standard double glazed windows, you should get most houses to 7 stars if you do them a bit smartly. So I think, especially when it's for return on investment, I think aiming for a passive house might be a little step too far, or you might not get the money back. But definitely aiming for a highly energy efficient home that is done well. So not just on paper, but that you actually have people working on site that know how to properly install windows and insulation. That can go a long way.
Fantastic. So, Simone, in terms of what you do, tell us a little bit more about your firm, what you do, and also, is Is it mainly only in Victoria? Can you only design for
No,
Victoria?
we can do Australia wide, but having said that, we only have one project in on the Gold Coast or Gold Coast hinterland and one in Canberra. But in theory, we can design everywhere, but here is a little bit easier.
Mm.
Having said that, with Zoom and all, things are not as bad when they're far away. But like I said earlier, when I started my business, I had little kids. So quite early on, I was relying on Skype meetings early on because I was just not able to drive everywhere and see people. So right from the start, we would typically do interactive design meetings with our clients where, similar to here, where I share the screen and we do changes on the go to the design.
Yeah.
And we pretty much do everything when it comes to energy efficiency. So I'm a big believer that no matter how much, what your budget, you can make any home more energy efficient or improve your house. So we do all kinds of projects from small retrofits where people just want to make their home perform better, small extensions, big extensions, new buildings, townhouses, passive houses, everything.
So is it possible then if someone's got a plans already,
Yep.
say there's DA approved or whichever, is it possible to then come to you and say, Simone, is it possible
Yep.
to make the changes there and
Yeah.
improve the rating?
Yeah, so actually funny that you said that. We have quite a few projects like that where we take over projects after the design or after town planning, where we typically start then rather with a bit of a design development and just see, are there some simple ways, how could we improve the function? But also, I'm all about affordability. Like I said, it doesn't have to be expensive, but often houses are designed really complicated, especially when it comes to structure. So, for instance, when you have double-story buildings, often walls don't sit on top of each other, or there are just really complicated details, or tiny things that don't give it much, but add a lot of money to it. So, typically, we would try to simplify those things, and to do that, we try to work really closely with builders right from the start. So typically, as soon as a design is finished, we would talk with a few builders and see to get a builder on board early on to make sure that whatever we design is within the client's budget. Because, I've seen too many people that spend potentially sometimes years when it's about town planning and other things to get to tender stage. And if you find out at tender stage, you just cannot afford the build. And I think that's everyone's nightmare. And we definitely want to make sure that you find out how much it could cost after the design stage. And if you have to make some changes or compromises, it's not good, but at least you know it then, and then you can react to it and do changes accordingly.
Excellent. Okie dokie. Well, if anyone's got any other questions, we'll probably, if there's anything that you wanted to add, Simone, before we start to wrap up.
Let me think. Yeah, I think just going back to what I said before, that every little bit counts. Even if you can't afford the whole, the whole shebang, do as much as you can with your project. And I think the most important thing is spend as much as you can on your windows and on your insulation, because you will never ever touch them again. A kitchen or a bathroom you can update in 10 or 15 years, or your light fittings, you can update in a few years. But when it comes to your insulation or windows, you will never ever change them again.
Windows insulation.
Yes.
Two things. If there's two things that you need to do, windows and insulation.
Yes.
Yep. Alex is finishing up. Do you have a certified? So, do you have to have a certified designer to have a certified passive house?
Not necessarily. It helps because otherwise there are a lot of things you just don't know. But I guess you need someone who can do the calculations for you, and someone who helps you with the details. But also you need either a certified builder or a builder who's at least willing to go the extra mile.
Oh, so the builder again has to be someone that
knows about it. So you can get certified passive house builders, but they don't need to be certified, but they have to be keen and willing to do what it takes.
Okay, great. Todd's asking about roof insulation. Is insulation blanket directly under the iron more efficient than directly above the plasterboard of the ceiling? Ah. like this as
It
opposed to?
depends. Yeah, so the one important thing is you have to stay as far away as you can from sacking, because often blankets come with sacking with kind of a metal
Mm.
layer, and they don't allow any breathing. So you can trap humidity inside and you can get massive issues with humidity or mold.
Mm.
So sadly, common practice is that most people use sacking everywhere, and it's common practice. There is a bit of talk in the industry that it needs to change, but sadly, it's not quite there yet. So you have to make sure that any membranes are breathable. Luckily, nowadays you get at least one or two options in the hardware stores. But in terms of insulation, in a perfect world, you would have two layers of insulation. You would have one straight under the roofing and one on the ceiling. Because the thing is, if you only had your insulation layer on the ceiling, you could trap heat inside your roof cavity in
Mm.
summer. And imagine you have 50 or 60 degrees in there, it slowly comes into your house. And you don't want that to happen. So ideally, you need the insulation on the ceiling level and in the roofing. In Europe, that's actually mandatory. You have to do it. Here in Australia, it isn't.
But one of the things we definitely noticed the difference it made to insulate the ceiling properly, but also having an electric whirlybird
That can
that
make, yeah.
that would that it, whether it the wind, whether there was wind or not, that it would suck up the heat, because
Yeah.
as you say, in summer it can get
Yeah.
stinking hot.
And with those old houses, when you can't change many things, but at least you can heat exchanger. Like you said, you can install something into your roof cavity to get the hot air out. That can help a lot.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I can't see any more questions, and Sean says, "Sorry guys, got in late. I'll catch up on the beginning shortly." Thank you for tuning in. There is a recording, and you can obviously watch it again in the videos section of the Property Development Australia Facebook page. Thank you so much, Simone.
Awesome. Thanks for
That
having
was
me. I hope it was not too technical.
no, I absolutely enjoyed it, and I hope I think there were a few people that did as well. I think it is important that we do just little bits and pieces to make things
Yes.
like from a personal point, we've done a few things to increase insulation and the
Yep.
windows, and it's made a huge difference. Even
Mm.
though, and you said, with rental houses in
Yeah.
particular, even a small house, and if
Mm.
it's not well insulated, it is freezing.
But having said it, just two tiny things I just remember when it comes to incentives, because sadly Australia is so far behind. Europe has, or Germany has a few amazing incentives to get developers on board. So, for instance, if you do go above and beyond with energy efficiency methods, with windows or insulation, you get interest-free mortgages. So, you can borrow extra money from the banks. Or even better, when you're developing, you can build a higher density if you build a passive house. So imagine you do apartments or units or whatever, or office buildings or whatever it is, they allow you a higher density, which then in the end gives you a bigger return on your investment than building it the standard way.
Ooh,
It's amazing. And
that's
people jump on
fabulous.
board. And for instance, what is it? Vancouver, New York. So there are quite a few cities. Canada is one of the forefront. There are quite a few states where passive house is mandatory for any new house. And New York is even better. New York has put a rule in place that any existing building has to be transformed to passive house within whatever the next 10 or 20 years.
I think those are great incentives. I know this, in terms of we talked about this last week. The Bank of Australia is
Yeah, they're good.
providing.
Yes,
So
that's really good.
that's great. But I think we definitely need to do more to
Yeah,
encourage the whole
yeah.
industry to think about.
And especially something to encourage developers and investors. Why should an investor or spend money to upgrade an apartment or a rental property? Why should there? There is no reason. So we have to create reasons, and unless they're created, no one will do that. Why would
Yeah,
you spend $20,000 for nothing?
yeah.
But
Okay,
imagine
good.
you get the $20,000 whatever interest free, or you get whatever 50% of it as a grant because you're doing something good for the tenants.
Yes.
Suddenly things get way more interesting.
Alex, vote the Greens. We need to lobby. We need to lobby the industry to provide a lot more incentives for developers to
Yeah.
think and build differently.
Yes.
So thank you, Simone. That was fantastic. Great to have you here.
Thanks for
And
having me.
please hop on, if anyone's got questions, pop them in the chat. And Simone, please feel free to respond as well. Anyone that needs to come in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Either look us up on our website, gruenecodesign.com.au, or Facebook or Instagram, Gruen Eco Design.
Excellente. Great.
And I'm constantly trying to write heaps of blog posts about how to make your home more energy efficient, or where to save money, or what not to do. So try to keep the content flowing.
Thoroughly enjoy them. That's
Thank
great.
you.
Well, you stay warm
I
and
will.
stay safe. Thanks you very much again. Thanks
Thanks, everyone.
everyone that tuned in. Alex, Sean, everyone in the Facebook land. We will see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Yes,
Bye.
bye.